On today's show, we dig into whose playoff performances have caught the eye of the collecting community and what impact will Macklin Celebrini have on the hockey card hobby. This is episode 2 of the Hockey Card Haven podcast. Hello and welcome. This is the Hockey Card Haven podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Anthony Santini. We're hosts here of the podcast, here to dive deep into the world of hockey card collecting, flipping, and investing. What's going on, Anthony? How you feeling today?
Feeling good. Back from vacation. Obviously sucks. I wish I was in Mexico right now, man, but I'm all tequilaed out. No more tequila, no more tacos for me. My mom came back. She was like, let's celebrate. Let's have some Mexican tacos for you.
Were you there Sunday? Were you there for Cinco de Mayo?
So we were there for Cinco de Mayo, and oh my God, it was the worst decision ever to book our night during Cinco de Mayo because we were kind of just partied out. We wanted to chill. We didn't want to go by the pool. Our checkout was by 12, so we couldn't really go swimming and then shower after. The shuttle came at 3, so we pretty much sat in the lobby for about 2.5, 3 hours watching everyone just have an absolute time and a half.
Oh, it's funny.
I was so disappointed when I saw a couple months ago that we were going to be there during Cinco de Mayo. I didn't really put the process and really get the gears thinking like, oh, we'll be leaving that day. I won't want to be like drinking, eating, listening to music. Yeah. Kind of bummy, but we'll see next year.
Oh, well, maybe next year, another time. Lots to get into on today's show. We'll get through some of the news and notes from the hockey world. The fact that the San Jose Sharks have won the draft lottery and they'll have the opportunity to draft Macklin Celebrini with the first overall draft pick. And I think that's where we're going to start, actually, because I think that it's a fascinating conversation. Obviously, last year's number 1 overall pick, Connor Bedard, broke the hobby this year, quite legitimately broke the hobby. I don't see Macklin Celebrini having that type of pull here, but with him going to San Jose projectedly, what type of impact do you think that Macklin Celebrini will have on the hockey card hobby?
I mean, it's tough to say because everyone wants to think that, the first overall pick is going to have that massive impact. Just a year ago, we saw Connor Bedard go to Chicago, and then we see players like, what was his name? The forward, Lucas Reichel. His price shot up, grabbing him in dollar bins and then flipping him for almost $35 to $40 on
dude, $50 the day of when Chicago won. And Bedard was when they won the draft lottery that night, Lucas Reichel cards were going for $50 on eBay. It was insane.
It was ridiculous. And I think that's where a conversation, like what you're looking for, because that's what you would expect when you see the Sharks win the draft lottery. Last night, the first thing I did was go online and see kind of, pick around, see how the sales look for players like Eklund, players like Bordlow. Obviously, Will Smith, a player that hasn't had a young gun come out yet, hasn't really been in the league too long. I looked up his name to see if any pre-rookie cards have come out of him. Nothing really, but
he's still in college. So unless, I don't know if Bowman University has hockey cards, but that probably would be the only place where he'd be. But I don't even think they do hockey there.
Yeah, just general autographs and photo autographs is all you'll find on eBay for Will Smith. But I didn't really see that spike that we saw last year. For the perfect example, Lucas Reichel, and I'm sure everyone remembers how crazy his cards went last summer. And I mean, he had do we want to call it average season?
No, he had a pretty bad year, all things considered.
Considering he didn't even play on Bedard's line, and that was the entire hype of it all. And we remember with Taylor Hall cards. So for me, I do see an increase in prices eventually coming for some of these players like Bordlow, Eklund. Obviously, I'm a big Bordlow guy, so I'm going to say that. But I feel like that will come later on in the season if the gears start moving for these guys.
So that's the way you took it. So you're looking more so at, all right, who else's market will Celebrini impact as opposed to what Celebrini himself can do. You're looking at, like branching off of him, all right, who else can I capitalize on? Because Celebrini, I mean, the day that it comes out, like his rookie card's going to be expensive. It always is on day one, and a number one pick. And, he's a really good prospect, like really, really talented. He's not in the Bedard or McDavid or Matthews range, but, he's still a top end prospect that I think, they certainly people will be going after, and it's going to be an expensive card, probably in the $100 range, I would imagine, upon release. So where else can you make, those plays? And it sounds like you're going to try and pick around him and try and find guys, see, tide that can rise all boats. That's kind of going to be your strategy, which I think is interesting. Um, Most likely going to be a Series 2 guy now. Apparently, all the number one picks now end up in Series 2, which is unfortunate. Back in like the McDavid, Matthews days, they used to be in Series 1. And like that was like the big chase in Series 1 was your number one overall pick. And they had your number 2 overall pick and, headlining Series 2. And that's just not the case anymore, which I hate. So the Celebrini card probably going to have to wait until March anyways to get it. Now, my next question that I want to know about what, Macklin Celebrini could mean to the hobby. Do you think that wax prices are going to settle back down from the Bedard craze? Like, I don't think Celebrini is going to be able to carry the weight of a $400 priced box for Upper Deck, whether it's Series 1 or Series 2. I'd imagine we see card prices go back down. But how far down do you think they could get? Like, do you see them going back all the way to like 150 where we saw Series 1? Or do you think that they still end up creeping up into the 200 Canadian range per box, and that's kind of where things are just going to be from now on, considering now they know people will pay stupid prices because people love the hobby.
I mean, yeah, you said it best right at the end. People will pay stupid prices because they love the hobby and they love the player. And right now, for me, I think a lot of people love Macklin Celebrini. I mean, just look at the kid playing in college, playing great hockey right now. Canadian athlete, has already played for Team Canada, played great for Team Canada. I believe he's even going to play in
I
right.
think he originally was going to play at the Worlds, but then they ended up adding some players who got eliminated from the playoffs, and he ended up leaving Worlds. So unfortunately, he won't be playing there to up his stock. But
Either way, to continue the conversation, like I said, was supposed to play there. Obviously, won't be. Sucks. Would have been nice to see him. Could have seen that little hobby spike, or even just the fire start to really ignite from people watching the
yeah,
Worlds and playing with NHL caliber players and against NHL caliber players. How the draft lottery affects his stock, I mean, I think it affects it in a massive way. If he could have went to Utah, we saw Utah getting that second overall pick. If he went to Utah, I feel like there'd be a little bit more buzz looking
oh
at.
really? Interesting.
I honestly think so. Looking at Connor Bedard last year, obviously an original six team, that makes a massive impact in the hobby. Going to
Yeah.
Chicago, where they've already had their dynasty, massive fan base, Patrick Kane, Taves, Duncan Keith, Seabrook, all the history of all these great players that played in the 2010s. I just don't think that Upper Deck will be able to sustain the prices of the $400 hobby box. It won't happen. I think they're going to come back to 150, maybe 175. I think the sweet spot's really going to be like 159 plus tax. That's what we're going to look at for Celebrini.
Well, that's what Series 1 was, right? And then it all exploded with Series 2 when Bedard came out, and, you saw Klutz and Chara every single week putting out new product. Oh, we randomly found out we have more allocation. More cards are now available, and David Adams and same stuff. And all of a sudden, every time they found more product, it went up another $50. And eventually it ended up, like retailing for about $400 basically anywhere you go. I'll be curious though, like that one of one Bedard still is yet to be pulled. How much wax prices fall when that one of one is finally pulled? That $1 million bounty card, because if that gets pulled, there's no justifying the $400 box price or any price that it costs. Because even the Bedard Young Guns itself has fallen down into the 450 range, and I'm sure it'll dip to four, even maybe below that over the course of the summer. In which, even if you open up a Bedard, which is 1 in 8, 1 in 8.3 boxes on average will have a Bedard Young Guns at best, unless it's an exclusive or a high gloss, you get something else in the box, you're just going to break even on it. And that's if you're lucky enough to pull a Bedard. So and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Series 2, but also obviously Series 2 next year with Macklin Celebrini. Let's get into the NHL. Let's talk about what's going on in the hockey card market itself. So it's funny. The hockey card market, I often say, is very much, like the TSX, right? Or the New York Stock Exchange. It always is going up and down based on player performance. And nothing proves that more than playoff time. Like there's nothing like it in the hobby than around the playoffs when a guy just really heats up and gets going. Anything stick out to you, or anyone stick out to you as a guy who's absolutely killing it right now, whose stock is trending way upward?
I mean, there's three players that we wanted to discuss, and all three players have a chance to win the Stanley Cup. So we could even see a spike continue through these next 2 weeks if they could get through this round 2. Three names are Wyatt Johnston, Matthew Tkachuk, who a lot of hobbyists are very familiar with, considering his insane run last year, and his price is almost tripling in price for Future Watch PSA 10. So we're seeing that almost again this year with how well he's playing. And a third, a player who I've always noticed to be, do we want to say undervalued? I mean, for a goaltender, considering someone like Vasilevsky goes for almost $200 to $250 for a raw Young Guns, Jeremy Swayman, up 21% so far in the playoffs, absolutely annihilated the Leafs, was one of the biggest reasons why they were not able to advance to the second round. And these are three of the players
you could have said that without a smile on your face, Anthony.
I could have.
With a smile on your face. Anthony's a well-known Bruins fan, for those who are unaware. So
I could have, but I also could have put up my Bruins jersey in the back. I got my Lamar Jackson one for now, so I'll hold off. I know you want to. All the tissues aren't gone just yet in your tissue box from that first round.
Anyways, yes, I agree with you on the Jeremy Swayman part. I think he is definitely an undervalued player. I would imagine being, the goalie market's always kind of tough in general. Usually only one or two are actually worth a lick. And right now it seems to be Vasilevsky and Igor Shesterkin, two guys who are worth a good amount of money. And then, there's a big drop off after that. But Swayman, he is starting to see an increase in prices. He's a 2021-2022 Series 1 Young Guns. He's got 801 PSA 10 copies out there with just a 33% gem rate, though, Anthony. And I think that's notable when you look at Jeremy Swayman's Young Guns. Like, just a 33% gem rate is quite low, and it's quite good because that means that there's less supply. And when there's more demand and less supply, you see that increase happen. And that's what we've seen since the start of the playoffs. You could have had his PSA 10 Young Guns for $109. There was a sale for a 109 on April 18th, the day the playoffs started. His last sale was for $183 Canadian. That's an increase of 67% since the start of the playoffs. Wow. So that's quite impressive. People are starting to catch on here to Anthony Swayman, who's got a 5-2 record, a 142 goals against, and a 955 save percentage through well, I guess he's only played 7 games because Omar played game 2 for the Bruins, but through a series plus 1 game so far. And well, I'm sure he'll be able to continue it going forward. The guy that is really intriguing to me, who's seen the biggest increase in pricing surge over the course of the playoffs, is Wyatt Johnston and what he's been able to do so far with the Dallas Stars. Now, they lost last night, so they're down 1-0 in the Stanley Cup in round 2 against the Colorado Avalanche. But Johnston did score a goal, and he's now up to 5 goals throughout the playoffs with 8 points. He's a 2022-23 Series 2 Young Guns. He only has 454 PSA 10s out there, so not a very high pop count. It's not a low pop, but it's not an incredibly high pop count, and just a 34% gem rate. So, the 2022-23 Series 2 was a very, it wasn't the best quality in terms of print runs. So low gem rate there from PSA. Only 13% gem rate from Beckett too. I want to add as well. So like really, really low gem rates, which is good. His market is up 72%. 72% since the start of the playoffs. This hurts me, Anthony, specifically because I sold a PSA 10 Wyatt Johnston Young Guns right before the playoffs started at my last card show. And it was funny because it was like just around the end of the show, and just this guy was walking around and he kind of peeks over and he's like, "Ooh, Wyatt Johnston, what's the price on that?" And I think I told him at the time, like, "Oh, $180." And he's like, "Interesting." And I was like, he doesn't sound like he's into 180. So I was like, I'd let it go for 160, which is about what it was worth at the time, right? 150, 160. And he says, I'm going to take a lap. But so far, that's the only thing in the room that's intrigued me. He came back like 5 minutes later and bought the card. And now that puppy is worth $240, $260 actually, an updated sale from last night, $260. So I could have profited an extra $100 if I would have held that for just a few more weeks. But that's the business, right? Of the buy, sell, trade of hockey cards. And that's just my quick Wyatt Johnston story. But I think this kid's unbelievable, and he's going to be a player for a while for this Dallas team. I think is going to be competitive for a long time. I'm picking up Wyatt Johnston. That's a buy for me. Even at $160, like that still should have been a buy.
I mean, I definitely agree. Like you said, he's a buy. And if you could find the PSA 10s, they're so scarce, right? I believe it was 34% gem rate for PSA because that year was so hard to get that elective PSA 10 we've seen in the past. Do we want to call it like 3-4 years where just cards are being pumped out in terrible condition all the way back to almost Lafreniere's year where people are complaining Upper Deck is just pumping all these cards out and everything's terrible condition. Like we said with Swayman, that was a 33% as well.
Yeah, 33% for PSA. BGS was 23% gem rate. SGC 25% gem rate.
I mean, there's definitely an elephant in the room, and that's Upper Deck can't satisfy the quality of some of these cards right now. And, they are working on it because I've heard a lot of people say that the Connor Bedard Young Guns has been well-conditioned. I mean, I've seen a lot.
I think Bedard's even gem rate is I'll look it up right now, but I'm pretty sure his gem rate's in like the similar range, like 35%. I'll look it up right now, though.
Double check because I've heard the rumor is that they're doing pretty well. I'll take it from here. You do that. But yeah, Wyatt Johnston, like we mentioned, former Toronto Marlboro, 2003. I'm actually 2002, so I actually was able to watch him play with the 2002s just 4 or 5 years ago when he was playing in the GTHL, just maybe 20 minutes away from my house. He's been an absolute hobby sweetheart in the past 2 months, and it kind of it really ticks me off because I noticed last year he had this same hype in the playoffs. I don't know if you remember, but he had that hobby spike, that massive spike in his PSA 10. I believe it was I think it was the same time, mid-April, where his cards really spiked up, and we're seeing it again this year.
So I have the numbers for Connor Bedard. So it's a little higher than I thought, but not much higher. So the total population, total pop count is 4,886, almost 5,000 PSA pops. The PSA 10s, 2,196 PSA 10s, 44.94. So basically a 45% gem rate for Connor Bedard. So a little bit better, about 10% better, but still less than 50% gem rate. But the fact that we're up over 2,000 PSA 10s, and it's only been 2 months?
I think
March, April, 2 months since this card's come out. That's a lot.
I mean, for me, it's a little bit alarming. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to search up the Connor McDavid Young Guns PSA 10 Pop Report. I'll go on this little rant right here because I've been waiting for so long.
I already know your rant. Like the PSA BGS comparison?
No, not even that. It's just how many Connor McDavid PSA 10s there are compared to how many Connor Bedards already. And this is why I'm slightly alarmed with what's happening with the hobby, overprinting, junk wax, because it's
Yeah.
going to be hard to value that Connor Bedard young gun similar to a Connor McDavid young gun. I believe off the top of my head, it's 4,000, call it PSA 10s for Connor McDavid. Seems a little bit underwhelming considering 2 months of Connor Bedard being out, and there's already 2,000. Like, that's half of what
Yeah.
McDavid has in what, 8 years, is it? I guess, yeah, like 8, 9 years of the product being out for McDavid.
Yeah. Now, what I will say about that, just really quickly, because this we're going down a different road than we intended on.
Yeah.
What I will say about that quickly is back when Connor McDavid's Young Gun came out, BGS Beckett was more so known for hockey grading. So there are far more Connor McDavid Beckett 9.5s and Beckett Prestige 10s than you'll see with Connor Bedard. So that's a reason why I think there's less PSAs of like McDavid, Matthews, and all those pre-COVID cards, because Beckett was definitely the more preferred uh, grading company for the hockey hobby back then.
Yeah, so a little bit of a shift that could skew the numbers, but I see
Mhm.
where you're coming from. I know Beckett was kind of the top dog, if we want to call it, in the hobby. I've heard so many stories too about Michael Jordan rookies, people cracking PSA 10s to turn that into BGS 9.5s, and I'm sure that stays true almost 10 to 15 years ago for hockey cards as well.
Yeah, I would imagine so. So PSA 10, I'm looking up the numbers right now for your boy Connor McJesus. Not even close to where you thought they were.
Really?
PSA 10 gem 2,856. So there's only 600 less Bedards than
What?
McDavid's. Now
Makes my
that,
argument even better.
but that said, Beckett, remember what I said back in the day, Beckett was the more preferred grading system. 7,765 9.5s for
Okay.
Beckett. So over 7,700 Beckett's back in the day when McDavid came out. So you do have to kind of, you can't mirror them exactly when you when you compare PSA 10 pop. You've got to compare the gem pop and include Beckett as well, because when you do that, now you're looking at over 11,000 total gems
Yeah.
for McDavid.
Yeah, that definitely tells the story. You almost need to toss like a little bit of a handicap on it to explain why. So almost, if you ever hear those discussions now, I apologize, but numbers wise, I mean, I guess I'm correct numbers wise, but
Yeah, no, you are, but I think this is like an important reason as to why you and I want to do this podcast, because I think it's also like this is a conversation that people have all the time, but look, so not so I have been in the hobby a little bit longer than you, where I understood that at one point BGS and Beckett was king in the hockey hobby. So I had that background knowledge, knowing don't just look at the PSA pop for cards from pre-pandemic. You also have to look at Beckett, because that was very that was the go-to grading company. So it's just that little bit more knowledge, or that little bit more background, I guess, that I have. Who was trying to call me? Get out of
take it
here.
if you mean.
No, no, no. It's literally spam. It's always spam. It's never anyone who actually
No.
wants to talk ever. Um,
Anyway, well, anyone that
but,
wants to
but yeah,
talk, if you want to talk about players going down right now, because I know we wanted to talk about some players that are tossing the anchor over the boat, headed downwards. I'm going to give you 3 names. I want you to talk a little bit about what their market's going to look like come summertime. All 3 out of the
yeah.
playoffs right now, and all 3 kind of hit a roadblock, if we want to say, when it came playoff time. Player number 1, Austin Matthews. Player number
Mm.
2, Ilya Sorokin, and player number 3, Cole Perfetti. Touch up a little bit on what their market looks like right now as it softened up.
So, yeah, Ilya Sorokin's a really interesting guy. His market's never really been high, but he was kind of in the Swayman range, where I didn't understand why his card values were so low, considering that he's a surefire top 5 goaltender in the league. Same thing with Connor Hellebuyck. It's just goalies are undervalued all the time. And then Sorokin lost his net in the playoffs, which, surely I'm sure does not have hockey card collectors, investors, flippers, market speculators, excited about Sorokin's future, which I actually think makes him possibly a play if you can get him cheap enough. Like, if you can get Soroka Young Guns for under $10, I don't think that's a losing proposition ultimately, because I think Sorokin, especially if he's now going to be under the tutelage of Patrick Waugh, I think I like the direction in which this team can go. They had a good end of the season. If they could just build around it a little bit more and add some scoring punch, I think they'll be okay. So Sorokin, I think he's a guy who's definitely trending downward in terms of his value. But that's also, one man's trash is another man's treasure type of mentality. Might be worth kind of keeping an eye on, and in hopes that next year he regains his form and that value can go back up into the $20 to $25 range, maybe where it should be for a raw Sorokin Young Gun. But I even think like PSA 10s is down to like $50 or something. So you could even pick up a PSA 10 for rather cheap, all things considered, for a bona fide top 5 goaltender in the NHL. Austin Matthews is kind of the more interesting player, I think, that I'm going to be keeping an eye on throughout the offseason. We were at the card show literally 2 weekends ago now, like 10 days ago, basically. We were at the Sport Card Expo, and Austin Matthews, a PSA 9 Young Guns. This was in the middle of round 1 is when the playoff or when the expo happened. And a Matthews PSA 10 Young Guns started in and around the $1,500 range, I would say, on the Thursday preview day, and then dropped to about $1,300 by the end of the weekend after they had lost. I think they had lost game 3 and 4 at that point. I can't recall exactly how it went, but I believe they lost a couple of games and things didn't look good for the Maple Leafs. And his card lost a couple $100. And now it's in the 11 to 1200 range. So it continues to go down. I actually saw a PSA 9 sale of this card last night go for $596. Like PSA 9s were going for $750 with ease at the card show just 10 days ago. And here we are now. It's not reaching even the $600 price market for Austin Matthews. So I kind of look at the same thing. Sometimes in this hobby, when people are zigging, you got to zag, right? If there's a sell-off on Austin Matthews because he's no longer in the playoffs, might be a decent time to buy. I don't know if that's a what's the word I'm looking for here?
If that's the right idea.
I'm trying to think of strategy. If that strategy is the word I was looking for. I don't know if it's a strategy that you subscribe to. I'm curious to get your thoughts on it. But like an Austin Matthews PSA 9 Young Guns for $590. If 2 weeks ago someone said, "Hey, I'll sell you this for $590," I would have paid them I couldn't have took my money out of my wallet any faster.
I mean,
And
I probably
get those prices again in the next year.
I probably will. I mean, for sure, I probably would have went like this. You got any more? I'll take more.
Right? I'll buy 10 at that price. I'll buy 10 at that price.
No, exactly. It's one of
those
ideas where you put money into a player that's already established himself. I mean, I've had this conversation so many times with my peers, and Austin Matthews, a goal scorer, plays in a Canadian market, an Original Six team, one of the biggest markets in the NHL, pretty good gem rate, nice looking card, very popular player. All signs point to positive for Matthews. So that
checks all the boxes, right? Checks all
the boxes. So for someone that's looking to invest this summer, me personally, on a player that's going to be, I mean, do we want to say, I hate to say the word trending down because it's tough to say that after a near 70 goal season, Austin Matthews prices are going to trend down.
But every summer we see prices just go down anyways, right? Like every summer, like you and I were picking up Matthews Young Guns for like $1,000, PSA 10s for like $1,000 last summer, all day long. You could find
Yeah.
them for $1,000, right? At any show you go to, you'll find a couple in that range, maybe 1,000 to 1,100, depending on the guy, but you could find them in that range. And they got as high as $1,800 when he was on his 70 goal chase. Like that's big margins, right? And I capitalized. I made a play, and I bought mine in the summer, and I moved them back in, I think March, I think late March. I ended up moving my PSA 10 copy of Austin Matthews rookie card. But again, I got full value for that, and I made decent profits on it. And then I'll just wait until the summer and buy another one because there's plenty of them around.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you capitalized on it. I did the opposite. I made a big mistake. I had 2 Austin Matthews Young Guns PSA 10. I remember they were playing against LA. I don't remember exactly what goal it was they scored. They were wearing like their retro jerseys. I have it, or it's their black jerseys, beautiful jerseys. That's what I remember from the game, and it was just a nightmare. I got a text from a guy, and he was like, "I will come pick up both Austin Matthews Young Guns for $2,000 right now, cash." And I was like, okay. I mean, that's what I wanted for them last week. Like, that was my ask on the story. Sweet. Buddy came at night, picked it up, cash, boom. How are you? Have a day. Woke up the next morning, and Matthews prices just went like this. I think they were going for like $1,700 the very next day after selling it. Oh my God, dude. I probably had to take a Pepto-Bismol, the way my stomach was turning. I was in shambles.
Pepto-Bismol is the product you're looking for. I have a similar story I want to tell actually quickly. I want to tell it a little bit earlier in the pod, but I didn't get a chance to. But I'm on the other side where somebody offered to sell me something and I declined it. And the card has since exploded. And now I'm looking back on it saying, why didn't I buy the card? Why didn't I just pay what he wanted and buy the card? And it goes back to like my buy the card, not the comp discussion that we had last week in episode 1, but it was an Artur Shilov's clear cut Young Guns. Somebody walked up to me at the table at the expo and wanted, I think like the last sale, I believe was $35 for it or something like that. So he wanted like $35, $40. And I was like, well, I can pay you 70% comp, blah, blah, blah. And, I tried to play the game and I passed on it. He was like, oh, okay. I was really hoping to get, $35, $40 for it. I said, oh, okay, sorry, I can't pay full comp. The following night, it turned out that Shilov's was then named the starter because Casey DeSmith went down with an injury. And we know what Shilov's market has done ever since. Led this team into round 2, and he's going to be starting tonight for them against the Connor McDavid Edmonton Oilers. And the last sale, again, he wanted $40 for this card. The last sale I just saw happen just yesterday or maybe the day before of an Artur Shilov's clear-cut Young Guns from this year's Series 2 just sold for $160. I turned down a $40 offer. And like a week later, it's worth $160. And I'm just like, why? Why didn't I buy it? Now, at the time, he was the backup. He was the third goalie for the Canucks, right? So I was like, oh, I don't know if this guy's really gonna, do it. I'm gonna pass. And well, now I'm wishing I didn't, because that was definitely a nice would have been a nice buy for what he turned into. Okay, really quickly, speaking of guys who can be slept on, and Artur Shilov's was a guy who, was slept on, I guess. I was sleeping on him at the card show. I think there's still a couple more guys, like Wyatt Johnston. The secret's out on this guy. Obviously, Matt Tkachuk, everyone knows what he's all about, and there's not much profits to still be made if you're looking for a quick flip throughout the playoffs. But I think there's still a couple other guys out there who have yet to really explode, who I think are undervalued and, could still be worth speculating on for that, kind of quick flip throughout the playoffs if they have a hot week. So I've got a player, you've got a player. I'm going to let you kick things off here. Who's the guy who you're still kind of high on that you think is a very good value buy for speculating / flipping purposes?
I mean, for flipping purposes, I'm going to say that Dakota Joshua is my pick. And I'm kind of coming out of left field, choosing a player that's, a dollar guy, less than $5. I know your guy's a little bit more in value, so he kind of has that market already. But going into the Expo, I wanted to talk about it, and we had a little bit of a conversation about Dakota Joshua. He has been the absolute heart of the depth in Vancouver and one of the biggest reasons why they've been able to play so well, aside from the Stars. And I've listened to so many podcasts, so many insiders talk about his absence around, I think it was game 60 to game 70. Yeah. And I know him very well because I picked him up in fantasy, and this guy was an absolute monster.
Hits machine.
Oh my goodness. I think he probably got me like 9 hits in the fantasy playoffs category league. I ended up winning. Not a big deal, kind of a big deal. We'll talk about that another day. But yeah, he only has 17 PSA 10s with a gem rate of 41%, raw Young Guns as cheap as $1. So skip out on the coffee, skip out on the donut, skip out on the morning snack. Go pick yourself up a Dakota Joshua Young Gun. And I want to pull up a collection I have right now of them because I had them ready to go.
My. I know how many you have because we sat up there trade night on the Friday of Expo, and you sat down and you just put your entire like Joshua collection that you had on you, and it was quite massive. Yeah, these are the Dakota Joshuas. That what's the number there? How many have you counted? How many you got?
I haven't counted. I haven't been able to take too much of a look. I'd probably
count right now. It'll take you 13 seconds. Like, just go ahead and count. But I remember when I think it was game one or game 2 in the first series there, and Dakota Joshua had 2 goals and an assist, had those 2 goals like back-to-back game winner. He was, that was the everybody was talking about him the next day, and it was like, oh, everyone needs a Dakota Joshua on their team, and his Young Guns, like you said, you can find him in the $1 bin, $2 bins, and then I saw his Young Guns going for like $10 that next day. And that's what the playoffs can be all about. Those quick flips and striking while the iron's hot on a player, such as Dakota Joshua. And that's what kind of some of those cheaper plays are about. It's not necessarily you're going to make, hundreds of dollars on them, but you can X your money in a good way, right? Buy a card for $1, sell it for 10. But if you do that 10 times over, you've made $100 off your $10 investment.
Yeah, so the biggest angle for me, let's call it. So I counted, I have 30 Dakota Joshua Young Guns.
Bro, that's more than I have in Fiala's.
And you're a big Fiala guy, so that says a lot too. But my angle coming from this, picking up $1 bin Young Guns is, maybe not to grade them or to sell them individually, but if you can pick up, call it 30 for $30, and in the playoffs, just like we saw Silovs go from $1 to almost $10, and you
20.
just 20, really?
His raw Young Guns, I was just looking at it before we went live. His raw Young Guns going for like $20, $15 to $20, quite regularly on eBay right now.
That's insane considering a Scarl is what? A Scarl's probably what, $10?
Yeah, in that range.
Maybe. But anyways, finish up the
discussion. Might be a buy, people. He might be a buy.
Keep an eye on it.
Shelovs is a sell. Shelovs is a sell right now.
Please do not grade him. I was having this conversation with Eric, and I was like, there's probably someone out there that just sent probably 5 to 10 Shelovs Young Guns to PSA because they think in a couple months
people want him graded. They want to buy it graded. Like, it'd be a low pop, so you could probably get a decent price. But I did see some of the like Facebook card groups that I'm in, ISO a PSA 10 Shelovs Young Guns. So there is a market for it.
I mean, there's a market nonetheless, but do you really think by the time you get that sub back in 2 months from now, there will be a market? No. And that's exactly why we want to have these conversations, why we want to have this podcast in general, and why I want to announce right now, if you have a Shelovs Young Gun, please sell it, get rid of it. eBay, Facebook, don't grade it. Just sell it, take your profit, be happy. Yeah. Anyways, let's transition to a guy that you want to buy right now.
Yeah, for me, Seth Jarvis of the Carolina Hurricanes, I think, is still a slept-on player. He's from the 2021-22 extended series Young Gun set, one of the very few top dogs that's come out of extended in the past, although I think extended is going to be pretty good this year. We'll get into that when we get there in a couple of months. Just 356 PSA 10 copies. Decently high gem rate, though, 62% gem rate. It was a little lower for Beckett at 52%, SGC 34% gem rate. But we've seen sales in the range of about 90 to 100, $110. But you just look at the season that he had. He's a goal scorer. He's a playmaker. He's a top 6 guy on a team that I think could make a Stanley Cup push. They just went down 0-2 to the Rangers last night, losing in overtime. But Seth Jarvis is a really, really solid player. He's got 8 points so far through 6 playoff games. So I think Seth Jarvis, if he can grab his PSA 10 Young Guns in the $100-ish range, I still think there's some growth there. Now, truth be told, when I did this, it was when I made this selection, it was before they lost last night. So it was when it was only a 1-0 series. So fair warning on that one. But I still think that Seth Jarvis is a pretty slept on guy. And if you don't want to make the investment now, if they get eliminated in round 2 here, a few weeks after that, I think that there won't be a whole lot of competition to gobble up his cards. That might be a good time to buy some Seth Jarvis, because every single playoffs, Anthony, we see Carolina Hurricanes cards explode for about a month until they get eliminated, whether it's Jarvis or it's Svechnikov or it's Aho or it's Teravainen, whoever it may be. We always do see an increase come playoff time. So, a strategy that I've always had is kind of quietly gobble up Carolina cards, knowing that they're going to make the playoffs and they're going to make a run. And Seth Jarvis is someone who I think is still pretty super slept on. Still only like $10 as a raw Young Guns for 33 goal scorer to be playing on a cup contender. I think that's just, really good value still. Probably should be in the $25 to $30 range is what I think his value should be. So, underpriced people, I like picking them up.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a spike just at the start of this season where his prices really started to build up. And I'm not even going to say that that's because of his play on the ice, but you've seen him all over the media. He's a funny guy. I don't know if you've seen his interviews. He's done funny things. He's out there. He's very outgoing. And I feel like the hobby can appreciate someone like that. But just as much as he's talked off the ice, his on-ice game has spoke for itself. And he's had a great season. He had a great playoff. Obviously, they weren't able to pick up that win that went to double overtime last night. Funny enough, funny story, almost aside from things, I watched the full Rangers game and the full Colorado game, and I missed both overtime winners.
Oh, man.
So it was absolutely storming here in Mississauga. My satellite goes out during overtime, and I get a text that just said, like, Trocheck hard eyes. And I was like, oh, no. Turn to the Colorado Dallas game. I watched the entire game, placed my bet, $10 on Colorado. Here we go. Fall asleep 2 minutes before the OT goal is scored. And then I think you sent me a text. We were talking about something, and then that kind of like woke me up after the game. And I was like, oh my God, did I miss that game? So I missed both overtime winners. And obviously Seth Jarvis wasn't able to score that for Carolina last night.
But you're never done in a series till you lose on home ice. So now the series transitions back into Carolina. So they still have a chance.
Keep an eye out, gamblers, because the New York Rangers are plus 148. I don't understand how they're not favored, even heading back to Carolina up 2-0. So keep an eye out for that.
Canes have a pretty strong home record this year, if I'm not mistaken. Rod the Bod gets his boys in ship shape.
Oh yeah.
Really quickly before we take off for the day, just want to announce that the Fall Expo dates have been revealed, and it looks like November 7th to 10th, 2024. That is so November 7th to 10th for the Fall Expo, which is always so much fun. I mean, we just did the Spring Expo just a week and a half ago, and that was a great time, but nothing beats the Fall Expo. So book that, put that in your calendar, and I'm hoping that as we continue on with this podcast, I know we're only 2 episodes deep, but the thought process is by the time we get to November, we've built a decent following, and we can have like a listener meetup or something at the show and meet a lot of people. That'd be really cool. I'd be excited to do something like that. should this podcast be successful. If people like to listen to us, because I don't know yet. We don't know yet. We'll find out by then. I'm sure if people want to listen to us yammer about sports and cards and collecting in the investing world of hockey cards. But yeah, so November 7th to the 10th is the date of the Fall Expo next year. All right, buddy. That'll do it for us here today on the pod. Appreciate it as always. It was a lot of fun. Lots of good chats. I'd like to thank everyone for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe right here on YouTube. Eventually, we do plan to get going audio-wise for you on-the-go listeners, but as of now, YouTube video only podcast. We'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of the Hockey Card Haven podcast.